Okay, so we're going to start off with creating a basic bead. Now, one of the things I'm going to recommend for you is to start with your lightest color that you're going to use. So if you have, in this case, I do have a red, a white, and a blue, but in all honesty, so you can see it better, I don't want you to see it on the white surface. It'll be hard to see it. So I'm going to start with my red. So I'm going to take the X-Acto knife, and notice that I'm not fully unwrapping this. Like, you want to reserve the paper. That's going to help to protect touching of clay from color to color. So this polymer clay is pretty darn sweet to use. And we will be backtracking and going over some components of the polymer clay tomorrow. So I took just a little chunk of clay. I'll put it on the paper so you can see. And then just seeing like what it looks like from a corner of the piece off of this chunk. So I took a little section off using the X-Acto knife. And you're welcome to go ahead and do this yourself. So open one of your colors and you can do the same. Okay, now a couple things about polymer clay. So I put my little piece on here. Take a look at my vinyl. See how it has a red residue from the clay? So that's why I want you to work on top of the vinyl for a couple of reasons. Number one is I know that the tables are not 100% clean, and anything that's on the table will be picked up by your polymer clay. And number two, you don't want this to go all over the table. It's a lot easier for your own cleanup. So what I'm doing is while I'm waiting for you, I'm heating this up in my hands. I'm just manipulating the clay. It's kind of like wedging the clay. Put this little light on so you can see better. So I'm wedging the clay and it is starting to warm up in my hand just a little bit. And again, you can do the same thing as we are working here. Okay, so if you have your clay out, go right ahead and do that. You should find, are you guys finding that? Is your clay getting a little bit softer as you're working it in your fingers? Hopefully, yeah. Okay. So now notice mine are getting red. Well, it's hard to see it. My fingers are getting red from the clay. It washes off with soap and water, so that's really not a problem. So if your fingers are becoming discolored, as mine are, not a problem. Okay. So when it's warm enough and I feel I can manipulate the clay, the first thing I'm going to ultimately do is I'm going to break my clay up into smaller pieces, and I want them to be of like size. So when you're looking at jewelry, guys, a lot of the jewelry pieces are symmetrical. So like they might have a center part or a center little charm or something hanging down, and then they usually are pretty symmetrical. So if they have a certain amount of beads on one side, they'll have a certain amount on the other. So I'm going to work in pairs. So instead of two charms, or I should say two beads that are the same in size and are the same in shape. So I'm looking at that and I'm rolling them out. In this case, I can do a round bead. If I wanted to, I could do an oblong bead. I could make it a square bead. So I'm just kind of making them so that way they're the same in size and in shape. So in this case, I have this red clay, polymer clay, and I have two that are very similar in size and shape. Once I'm happy with my first set, and again, we're doing these in pairs, so that would be a set of two. You want two, okay? Notice you have 3 different colors of clay. You are welcome to do 3 sets of 2 in one color, 2 in a second color, and 2 in your third color. 6 is going to be the magic number of beads you need to create. So when I have mine all good to go, next thing I'm going to do is this. I have my open paper clip, and this is actually the very first thing I'm going to do. I'm going to carefully poke it through. I'm doing this slow, guys, because as you begin to poke this through, it can misshape your actual bead. Now, What makes a bead is it has a hole through it. I will hold this closer for you to take a peek at. And I'm wiggling it, so it's making the hole a little bit bigger. If you're finding that the shape of your bead is becoming a little wacky or funky, you can reshape it. Okay? So, and I'm going to ask Mrs. Grinstead in a minute if she would pass out a skewer to each of you also. Thank you. So, while I have this, notice I have my, can you guys see that little hole through the bead? Okay, that's only the beginnings. It's a lot easier to start off by using a paper clip first, because then you guys are going to carefully, and watch how I do this. We need to make that hole a little bit bigger. I should have picked a different color because I see it's not the easiest to see. So let me just try hold it up super close. Okay, one thing about polymer clay is that when you bake it, it does shrink. So if I don't make these holes big enough, after I bake it, you're not going to be able to use it unless it's strung through something that's really, 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 really thin. So here I'm going to just watch the technique. I think this will be helpful. Once you have a skewer, you're going to, I kind of go back and forth, like I'm wiggling it. See how I'm moving the skewer back and forth so it goes through the bead all the way to the other end. Now I notice that the end of my bead has a little misshaping to it. So I'm going to fix it. And then I'm going to put it through one more time. Now make sure you really like the shape of these, because the way that you have it on your skewer is going to be exactly what it looks like once it's baked. So I'm looking at, this is my bead. If I want to make sure it's a little bit smoother, I can roll it on my vinyl. And I actually really like how that looks. So I'm happy with the one. Okay. So you're going to do that for your beads. Same thing. I have my second bead here without a hole in it. So it's not a bead yet. Okay. It's just a little piece of polymer clay. So first things first, I want the hole going in the same direction. Okay. And you are going to poke it through, give it a little wiggle, and I'm wiggling the paper clip to make my hole a little bigger. If you actually poke it in and it's really off center, reshape your bead, okay? Because you're not going to be happy with it and it's just going to look a little wonky. So with each bead that you make, you're going to carefully put it through the skewer. If it's easier, if it's easier for you, you can take these off, but safekeeping, because you don't want to misshape them, okay? Like these are something you wouldn't want to throw into your backpack, because what's going to happen is they're going to get smushed. Here's that technique one more time. I'm twisting the skewer back and forth just a little bit, and I'm easing the bead onto the skewer. Okay. Now, again, I can see my fingerprints on here, and I really want it to look nice and neat. I'm taking it off, fixing my one side, putting it back on, and then I'm going to gently roll this. And I have my second bead. Okay, so you guys are going to use you need a total of 6 beads. 6 is the magic number there. Okay, you need to make them in pairs, so you have 2 that are alike. So in this case, you can do different shapes. I'm going to use red, white, and blue, so I can make them, but I have to make them in pairs, so that way you have some symmetry there when you start to actually create your jewelry. Okay, do I have any questions about that? All right, I'm going to stop recording this for a minute just so I make sure I don't go over the time limit.